A recent study from the World Economic Forum shows that 80% of the global executives say that their business model might be at risk, even at risk of being disrupted. And more interestingly for me is that 60% say that of them who have gone through a digital transformation, they have also transformed into new business models. So we see that we have to look at the intersection between digital transformation and business model transformation.
Today we have a renowned speaker, Carsten Linz, who is an author of Radical Business Model Transformation. And the book is translated in many languages and now in its second edition. Very popular. You may appreciate to check it out. Carsten is also one of the experts in World Economic Forum, and he is one of the top thinkers on ecosystem business model and how business models are changing and reimagining in this future we already live in. Carsten, COVID is changing businesses and businesses become digital. How they evolve nowadays?
COVID-19 is definitely, and the pandemic is definitely the greatest and fastest human behavior change at scale that we have seen ever in human history, in mankind history. So that's quite amazing. And that also has an impact. We see a substantial acceleration of digital transformation initiatives because every company evidently is now pushing here the needle, no doubt about it. I think only in the second quarter of last year, the cloud IT infrastructure investments soared and grew by nearly 40%. So it shows that also traditional cloud infrastructure investments are really now going through the roof. Now you can ask the question: is moving an email server to the cloud, is that digital transformation? I would say no, it's not digital transformation. So there's evidently more to that, but it's good that even critical CFOs also accept Office 365 project now in these times of the pandemic as the relevant one with the business case behind, which has not always been the case. But there's evidently more to that, and it's really not about applying digital technologies for what we have always been doing, only faster, more efficient. It's really about changing the game, to say it with your words. And it's about redefining how we create value, how we deliver value to our customers and other stakeholders, and how we capture the value for our organization.
In your piece in World Economic Forum, you mentioned that it's not enough to do digital transformation. Businesses need to reimagine themselves, literally. So what do you mean and how do you think about it?
It's interesting that despite that reset on the horizon, a lot of firms are doing very traditional stuff still, and they base their business models often on yesterday's logic. So a recent study from the World Economic Forum shows that 80% of the global executives say that their business model might be at risk, even at risk of being disrupted. And more interestingly for me is that 60% say that of them who have gone through a digital transformation, they have also transformed into new business models. So we see that we have to look at the intersection between digital transformation and business model transformation, and give you some numbers here. So in our book, Radical Business Model Transformation, we looked into 380 transformations at grand scale. Around the world. And if you now see where is actually the focus of these initiatives, that's quite interesting. So I would say the maturity still sits on the process automation side. So it's actually you're taking the process and you're making it more digital.
Right.
Nothing against that, but it's not changing the rules of the games, quite obviously. The second one is I would call it process reimagination, and we see more and more initiatives on that level. So I would call it level 2. A typical example would be a predictive maintenance scenario in an engineering department, for example. So this is kind of, would say, process reimagination. So you're putting your business processes at test before you re-implement them digitally. The third level would be driving a transformation of the operating model. So fundamentally, you're changing really the way how you create value. And it's really about making digital technologies an integral part of the value creation system of your organization. So not putting digital icing on the cake only, but really making that an integral part. And that would be, for example, Adidas had a nice example with their speed factory approach, a mass customization approach with an agile approach applied for a physical factory. But also, if you look at the financial services industry, for example, you see that many banks are building API hubs. So basically, they're exposing from a platform financial services so that they can be embedded in end-to-end processes of others. That could be smaller banks. That could also be business customers, and that's really interesting. But the most comprehensive level of digital transformation is really the digital transformation, which is driven with the help of a business model transformation. So the business model transformation is the means to drive your digital transformation, and that leads to an orchestration, a very coherent orchestration of all the digital initiatives across your organization or your line of business, at least, if you're a conglomerate or a multi-business company. And that leads to much more competitive edge. So fundamentally, why is not everyone doing business model transformation? Why is not everyone at level 4? Because it's hard, no doubt about it. Because digital per se is a horizontal phenomenon. It cuts across industries. It leads to a blurring of the traditional industry lines, but it also cuts across vertically integrated organizations, entities in organizations. So you need a strong horizontal orchestration in your company, and you typically require backing from the executive board, from the supervisory board, from your board of directors. But if you can achieve that, it's definitely the way to go. And I would always say, don't digitize the past, but really innovate and transform for the future. And I think there's business model transformation a very nice means to that end.
Really great motto, actually. So talking about examples of reimagining businesses or like business models, we see here that startups compared with large companies obviously operate in drastically different modes, right? Startups is typically very agile, they think differently and they think from the ground up. But for big companies, it's much more difficult to change and, a lot of legacy stuff. What are the examples of business reimagining that you think worthwhile highlighting?
Startups have the unfair advantage of starting greenfield, which is really great. As a corporate, you always have to start brownfield, so to speak, because you have some legacy, you have some history, but you also have potentially domain-specific knowledge that others don't have. So it's more about the combination. When we see that also in the financial service industry, it's more complementing each other. Startups working with large corporates and vice versa. Definitely. There are tons of examples also in our book. I like the Kloeckner example quite well because very traditional industry. We really moved from being a steel distributor to the XOM digital marketplace. So really first build a digital store, global price points and so on with Kloeckner I, and then moved in towards a two-sided open digital marketplace, so an open platform approach. And the idea is really that Kloeckner owns only a minority going forward. Today, Kloeckner, and it's steel business, we're talking steel business here, we're not talking B2C, we're really talking B2B, hardcore, 40% digital revenues. Also Nike, from running shoes to the Nike Plus platform, another nice platform example. But I also like to mention transformations towards holistic solution provider models. If you look into Xerox, for example, from hardware products to a BPO provider in documented related processes, or Knorr-Bremse, the leading provider of braking systems, who really escaped from commoditization and price pressure and really moved into parts of their business into a holistic solution provider for end-to-end maintenance processes for trains. So you can bring an entire train end-to-end into Knorr, and they're doing the entire maintenance from top to bottom, from start to end, which is quite amazing, but requires the buildup of specific competences. Also, the productization transformations play an important role these days. Many professional service companies are trying to productize their business, moving away from time and material into productization of intellectual property, and basically building in many ways software tools, not only for internal purposes, but really to bring them towards their customers. Infosys is one of these examples I like a lot, which is also mentioned in our book. We really moved from time and material into being a product company with Pinnacle in the financial service industry. One of the quite impressive transformation, because of always to drive transformation in a single line of business, in a business unit, in a division is difficult, but even more difficult is to drive it at grand scale across an entire organization. And I think Microsoft, for example, has done a nice job, especially under Satya Nadella, if you ask me personally. I'm not sure if you still remember what Satya Nadella said in really his first speech as brand new CEO, and still remembering that no one wanted to be the CEO of Microsoft on that very day, because it was not the company we know today. He really said it's about cloud first and mobile first, and everyone said, yeah, that's true. But the interesting thing was he didn't mention Windows. So he omitted it. Basically the flagship product of the company. So Microsoft became much more empathy driven, more partner friendly, partnered not only with partners but direct competitors, so entered into more competition constellations, being a partner and competitor at the same point in time. And also he exited from an ecosystem. That's also important to remember. So Microsoft Phones was the exit of an ecosystem. So it was evident that iOS and Android became the winner in that game, and that it was very difficult for Microsoft to catch up. It was a wise decision, potentially ex post, you can always say that, to exit from that hard ecosystem competition, because you know that platform games have a slight tendency towards winners take it all, or some take it all, and that was, I think, a wise one. Also, adding new ecosystems, because we're talking about ecosystem also in that video cast today. I mean, with LinkedIn and GitHub, I think Microsoft has also done a nice move into very open ecosystems, especially with GitHub, but also for the business community on LinkedIn. And last but not least, because we're talking about business model transformation here, I mean, it's really a nice transformation which proves how successful it can be if you drive a digital transformation with the help of a business model transformation. Because the guiding principle was to move away from upfront licenses to subscription-based models, so recurring revenue streams. And I think also it's not always easy to match that against the expectations of the capital market. But I think Microsoft has really done a nice job in that regard. So I think Satya Nadella can be proud of what he has achieved in that regard.
I completely agree with you. He has done like a tremendous job. And nowadays, Microsoft is drastically different from where it was, just a few years ago.